Okay, guys. Hey, I am in Boston. I'm at one of my very, very favorite places in the whole world called the MFA, the Museum for Fine Arts. And I've wanted to take you guys on a field trip here for a long time, but it's hard to arrange. So I'm going to take the field trip for you. I think you're going to be surprised at what we see. Okay, let's go inside and I'll see you in a second. Okay, guys, now check this out. Okay, I love this. I really like these Chinese dogs. They're called dogs of Fo or Fu dogs. This one in particular, I like to think she's a she. I think she's got an attitude. Do not mess with her. And but this is my favorite view in the whole place. Yeah, I'm getting to the whole point, which is Egypt, but come on upstairs. I want you to see what happens when we get to the top of these stairs. Mr. Flad, we've seen stairs before. That's not very exciting. Well, yeah, there's stairs, and then there's stairs, and there's ceilings, and then there's ceilings. One of the things I like about this museum is it's not afraid of big spaces, but I wanted to look at this sculpture. Yeah, Mr. Flad, we kind of saw the sculpture. Why are you making us look at it up close? Well, because I'm pretty sure you didn't actually get an idea of how big this sculpture is. This sculpture is taller than most buildings, and it's made entirely of glass. But this is why we're here today. Art of the ancient world. Okay, art. I guess art is okay. But, what does this have to do with what we've been learning? Oh, I think you'll see a connection. The MFA has a whole wing full of Egyptian antiquities. Antiquities is a big word that means really old stuff. I'm going to start by looking at this section of a wall that they have brought from Egypt, and I wanted to look at these hieroglyphs. I just wanted to see if any of these look familiar to you. Again, the bird theme, the ibis. Okay, if we look up, we see the profiles of a pharaoh, and I'm not sure who that is. And again, look at these symbols. Now remember, these symbols were like they're called a rebus. It's a way of using sounds of the names of objects to make a word that would have made sense to an ancient Egyptian. To us, it's really hard to figure out. But I just also want to say, I really like whoever this is smelling a flower. Okay, now a lot of the time when we're looking at these pictures from ancient Egypt, we're thinking, we don't have a lot in common with these people. This is an actual dress that they have found from thousands of years ago. And if you look at it, it looks exactly like something Jennifer Lopez or Dua Lipa might wear on the red carpet. But right now you're saying, hey, how did a dress survive for several thousand years? This was for a very wealthy woman, maybe a queen. But if you check it out, it's actually made of thousands and thousands of hand-carved beads. How awesome is that? Okay, remember we talked about how the Nile River influenced everything in Egyptian society. Now, they didn't have chickens. Those were still being developed in Asia at that point. They were still jungle fowl running around in Asia. But what was the domestic bird that they could tame in Egypt on the Nile River? Okay? In a lot of these paintings, carvings, hieroglyphs, you're going to see ducks and ducks and ducks. I can't remember, but which god was it? A very major god, and he's got a goose on his head, right? So clearly this had meaning to the Egyptians beyond just what can we eat tonight. All right, I'm walking through the hall at the MFA, and look who I met, an old friend. Hello, Bobby. And if he could speak, he would say, "Go away or I'll punch you really, really hard." Okay, more hieroglyphs. I just wanted to point out, look how many eyes there are. And that goes right back to the base of Egyptian religion. Remember we talked about the eye of Ra? How when his children were lost, he plucked out his eye and sent it out looking for them. And then when the eye came back, it was so jealous and angry that he'd grown a new eye. Well, clearly for the Egyptians, the eyes were very important. And you see that in the ancient world. There's an old saying the eyes are the windows to the soul. And I think the Egyptians had a belief a lot like that. All right, we're in the room with actual mummies. Now, this is what we called the sarcophagus. Do you remember when we talked about that? And remember we talked about how every inch of the sarcophagus was carved or painted with spells and prayers. And for the Egyptians, spells and prayers were pretty much the same thing. Okay? This is one of many layers that the ancient Egyptian, that a wealthy Egyptian would have been buried with. Some of them were fancier than others. Okay, remember we said that, to the extent that the family could, if they were wealthy enough, they would bury their loved one with all the things that they would need in the next life, if they were able to pass the heart weighing ceremony. Now, one of the things that they would be buried with were these figurines. They're called shapti or ushabti or ushabdi, depending on which expert you listen to. And a lot of times they were painted this beautiful turquoise color, or they would be made out of clay and fired with crushed up turquoise in the glaze, so that it would be this blue-green color. That was important to them. Anyway, these would be the servants for the dead person in the next life. Okay, and here are jars full of food or oil or things that they would need again in the next life. Hey, here's another sarcophagus, and look who we see on the top. Okay, it's a jackal. There are a couple of jackal gods. Who is this probably? Yeah, it's probably our buddy Anubis. And here's one more mummy. This is from the Roman period. What I mean by that is, one of the things we're going to talk about in class is that the Greeks were able to the Egyptians were able to conquer a lot of the countries around them, but at various times they were also conquered by other countries. The Greeks and then the Romans. Now, if you look at this, this is a later period mummy from the Roman period. And, he's been wrapped up. And remember that the custom was to paint a picture of the dead person on the outside of the mummy. In the case of King Tut, Tutankhamun, they made him look really, really fancy and handsome. We know from his autopsy that, in fact, he had a lot of medical problems, and that's not really how he looked. But by the Roman period, they were actually doing real portraits, real paintings. When we talk about Rome, we're going to talk about the lost city of Pompeii. It's not lost because they didn't know where it was. It's lost because a volcano erupted and covered it up with ash. But as they've dug through and uncovered the walls, they find portraits that look exactly like this. And so here's an example of a Roman era Egyptian mummy and a Roman child. It's kind of sad, but it's also kind of beautiful. The family wants to honor their beautiful, important, precious child. Okay, guys, look what I found. Canopic jars. Okay? And remember, the 4 canopic jars usually had the 4 sons of Horus. And here on the right, again, is our friend Bobby. And he's got the intestines. Okay, this mummy was buried with a whole box of Shaktis, an army of servants, but check it out. They also dressed her in her best clothes. It looks like that dress that we looked at the beginning of this tour. All right, now this doesn't look like much, but this is the lid to a sarcophagus. And I'm going to go a little closer so that you can see. It has a lot of symbols and a lot of important stuff. But then if you look, there are thousands and thousands of hieroglyphs. This is an important spell helping the dead person make their way to the afterlife and through the afterlife. Look at these hieroglyphs. These are hieroglyphs that we're really familiar with. You've got ibises, you've got birds of prey, you have eyes, you have snakes. And again, think of the time and effort it would take to get scribes to write all that for you. This was from a very wealthy Egyptian. Remember we said that they would bury a dead person with all the things that they would need in the future, in the next life, to help them out. Yeah, this is from not even a king. This is from a royal governor. So someone who just ruled part of Egypt and reported to the pharaoh. But he was buried with all the transportation he would need in the next life. Remember, the number one way of getting around Egypt was on the Nile River. So he was buried with a bunch of boats. Now, these are not life-size. These are all about the size of a Barbie doll, maybe. But check this out. Now look, this would be his royal barge. This is the governor's barge. Yeah, look, it's fancy. Yeah, it's full of slaves or servants who are going to take him around from one place to another. Now, according to the plaque that explains this, when archaeologists found this man's tomb, it had been ransacked by grave robbers. Remember we said most of the important graves were found over the thousands of years, and the grave robbers took all the really valuable stuff, the gold, the jewels, the oils, the perfume, the really valuable stuff, and they just kind of threw everything else in a corner. And when the archaeologists found this, all they found were pieces of models, because this had all been just thrown into a pile and broken up as the grave robbers were trying to get to the valuable stuff. And according to the plaque, the archaeologists took all the little tiny pieces and put it together again to make this set of boats. And it took them over a century to put everything together. A century means 100 years. That's hard to even wrap my head around. And I found a matching set of canopic jars. How many of you did that ombre blue color on your canopic jars? You were very historically accurate. And I wanted to finish up with this panel right here. This tells a story of a dead person's soul and their trip through the afterlife. But I wanted to focus on this. The heart weighing ceremony. Look on the left. It's a very stylized image of a heart. And on the right, a very stylized image of a feather. But they're weighing the heart against the feather of truth.